Picture this. You're sitting with your friends, other moms who have gone through a divorce or are contemplating, who maybe didn't picture their lives co-parenting, but are there with you. You're sharing your stories, you're inspiring each other, validating and challenging each other through your shared experiences. You're belly laughing, tearing up, and enjoying your favorite cup of coffee all at the same time. You don't judge each other, you empower each other to continue on your journey, to heal, and to just be you, whatever that looks like. Welcome to Co-Parenting and Coffee. Thank you for joining us. We are both co-parenting and are excited to have you as part of our journey.
And we're here for season 2. Yay! So exciting. I mean, season 1 was so awesome and so fun. And thank everyone for listening and sharing. We so appreciate it.
Yeah, I am so excited for this new season. I'm really proud of our first season and was disappointed we had to end so abruptly. Maybe we can give a quick download what happened. We were all set to record another episode in the middle of June, and unfortunately, my mom got sick. She's doing okay. Nobody needs to panic. Anyone who listened to the Mother's Day episode had a chance to meet both of our moms.
I love your
But
mom. I mean, I love my mom, but I just love
I
your
love your
mom.
mom too. Thank you. Yeah. And so yeah, so my mom it was a little bit touch and go there, but she's doing okay now and has some great doctors who are helping her get well. It's nothing long term or anything that I think is going to be limiting for her, but it was a little bit of a scary moment. So
Yeah.
I literally had to drop everything.
It wasn't even a scary moment though. Like you were there for like a month.
I was
Like,
there. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Like,
I guess
yeah.
I'm thinking about the hospital part. There was a
Yeah.
hospital part, and that
Yeah,
part
of
was a little
course.
scary. But yeah, so that kind of prompted us to be like, let's just take the summer off. We'll be back. So
Yeah.
sorry to leave you all hanging there, but we are back and very excited. Today is my kid's first day of school, and we're recording it
That's
today.
right. I feel like
Um,
even though, so my daughter's been in school now for a week-ish, but I
yeah.
mean had 4 days off in between. And I feel like she's been in school for a month already. I don't know. Like I'm like, oh my God. This
I'm not ready for summer to be over from the standpoint of like the days are getting shorter and the weather's getting cooler, although I don't necessarily mind that either. But the kids going back to school, I'm delighted by.
yeah, fair. I know, like, come on. I think for me, like, usually I'm like all about summer. I love summer. Look, we have a pool, it's so fun, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. This year I am ready for hoodies. I am ready for Halloween. I am over summer. I don't know. I don't know why. It wasn't
You
a
guys
bad
are all
summer.
done.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm ready to move along here.
Seriously. So yeah, it's funny. The kids and I went to see our family, including my mom down in New York over the weekend. And on the drive back, we stopped at a Starbucks. Hashtag sponsor us. We walked into the Starbucks, and one of my kids was like, "Pumpkin already?" I'm like, "September 1st, kiddo." So
So I,
yeah.
I actually don't know this about you, Valley. Are you like you cannot have pumpkin until September 1st, or are you like I don't care, I'll have pumpkin like whenever it's available?
Yeah, I'm more of the latter. I'm not upset about things that show up. I I was a little offended by the Halloween stuff out in like July in
Yeah.
the stores, but like aside from that, I mean, I don't know. If you put your Christmas tree up now, I don't care. Like
Yeah, it
I'm
doesn't
here
bother
for
me.
it.
I mean, I'm not doing it, but good for you. I mean, but pumpkin
Yeah.
spice, I'll drink pumpkin spice at
Yeah.
Christmas if I can.
So did not get a pumpkin spice latte. So
And did like a modified pumpkin spice latte
yeah.
at Starbucks because it's not that far from my work. And so I walked down. It was the fall. It was actually like quite nice. I walked down there. It was like folly, cool air. And I got my modified pumpkin spice, which made me so happy. And cold foam that, I'm obsessed with.
I'm super pumped if we can pivot to how we're kicking off this season. Today's guest, I'm a little bit giddy about.
Oh my God, such a good episode. I'm not like, I try not to be like over, but like, I just love her. I love the topic. Like, and I so desperately wanted to do this topic at the end of last season, and it just didn't happen. And I'm just so happy.
And
And
so,
yeah,
she was the perfect guest for us to cover for this topic, and
yeah.
I'm really, really excited to share it with everyone.
Me too.
Um, do you want to do today's quote, or do we have anything more to say about the
No, let's
topic?
do the quote. I'm
Okay.
excited about the quote too. So here's a funny thing. People must do this. Everything that we do, I think we're like novel. Like I think we're so brilliant, or like it's something that nobody else does, but it's usually something that everyone else does, and I just don't know. But Allie and I send each other quotes a lot, but like something that either for the podcast or just something that, reminds us of each other or whatever. And I'm sure you do this with your friends, so I know I'm not novel.
It's
But
called
this one,
pebbling.
yeah, what is it called?
It's called pebbling.
Oh, God,
It's
everything has a
something to do with,
name now, and I love
yeah,
that.
it's something to do with how penguins like show each other love by giving each other pebbles or
Mm.
something. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have it completely right, but yeah.
So Allie and I send each other quotes. And one Allie sent me recently that I love, was the weird thing about bravery is that if you're doing it right, it feels like fear. And
Hmm.
I saved it because it's so true. And
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
so many parts of getting divorced or the co-parenting experience that feels like fear. And it is fear sometimes, but also like mashed with bravery.
yeah, yeah. It does take courage,
Yeah, it sure
or
does.
maybe it's standing up to your ex and upholding a boundary,
Hmm.
or maybe it's realizing that you need to lean into what Dr. Becky Kennedy says is more sturdy parenting, where you have to really like dig deep to help your kid.
Hmm.
And I would say argue that that ties very well into today's episode, and what Hillary had to do for her kid.
So
So
much bravery in this
yeah,
episode, for
yeah.
sure. And yeah, I mean, I see it all the time. This is not an easy road.
Hmm.
We've said a million times, like, we're not advocates for divorce. We're
Oh yeah, I would never run around saying everyone should get divorced, but I would say to my friends who are in a miserable marriage, like,
an
is this any
unhappy.
better?
Right,
Really?
right.
I can go on and on, but having the courage to do what is best for you and your kids, no matter what that looks like,
Hmm.
that often take a lot of bravery.
Sure does. Well, thank you for being so brave.
Thank you for being so brave.
Hmm.
Thank you to our listeners for being brave. And also, one funny other thing I want to say before we go
Yeah.
is I have some dear friends who listen to this podcast despite not being in a co-parenting situation, who whose partners have like walked in on them listening to our
But wait,
podcast. We're
why are
sitting
you
on the
listening to
phone
this?
and
Yeah.
been like, do we need to, do we need to
Right.
talk?
You just put that. That's actually a new way to like let them know. You just, we'll let them know for you.
Send us
That's
their
going to
phone
be an
number. We'll leave
espresso
them a
shot next week.
voicemail.
Our newest espresso shot.
Oh my
Hmm.
God. All
No,
right. How
no.
very unserious of us.
Yes.
All right. Well, should we pivot over to the
No.
coffee?
Bye.
Okay. Well, I am so excited to introduce you to our first guest of season 2.
Yeah.
Hilary Smiley is many things. She's a mom, and she is a very talented fundraising professional, a great friend, and it's just a pleasure to be able to do this with you, Hilary. She's also the mom of a transgender young adult,
Mm-hmm.
and has some really wonderful insight to share with us. And I'm gonna turn the floor over to Hilary to really introduce yourself, and maybe after that we can sort of dive into to your story.
Sure. So, I mean, you kind of summed it up. I My name is Hilary. I have actually two children. My son Felix is going to be 19 next Monday, which is crazy to believe. And my daughter Skylar will be 17 a week after that. I have been in nonprofit work and fundraising marketing for pretty much my entire career. I will say my son, Felix, who's 19, I think is probably the reason why I'm here today, really to talk about what it's been like to parent a transgender child. And Felix came out, when he came out of the womb, being who he was, but well before most other kids did, and before this huge influx of trans and non-binary kiddos, or queer kiddos in general, have come out. And so he came out also at a time where I was just post-divorce, and having to navigate the complexities of being a divorced family with a kid who was expressing things that we didn't understand. And it's been quite the journey. I think the piece I guess I didn't say is it's turned me into, I guess, a bit of an advocate and an ally, because I realized how fortunate we were to be in Massachusetts, be surrounded by friends and family who immediately embraced him. And there was there was plenty of strife, but certainly those closest to us made it a lot easier for him to come out. And I realized that I had a responsibility to pave the way in some ways for other parents, and in particular for other kids, making it easier for people to talk about it, so that more kids had an opportunity to express who they are.
How old was he when he came out?
It's interesting. I always say 9 when people ask me that question, but he really started coming out by the time that he could pick his own clothes. We would start to put him in girls' dresses, and he would say no. He was wearing, basketball shorts and t-shirts, and high top sneakers, and he cut his hair short, very early on, wanted hair like daddy's. I joke that I just assumed I had a butch lesbian, and I was fine with that. Yeah. Would have been an easier road. It's so funny how people are like, I've been called a groomer by many online, never to my face, thankfully, but I think who would groom their child to have a life that is harder for I mean, that is absolutely ridiculous. But, I would have been fine either way. I think, the trans piece was, there was nobody out. Josh Jennings was just coming out. Her show was just starting to air. And, I've gratefully been able to meet her mother and meet the family and have thanked them, just for being as vocal as they were, because it gave us something to see. Because there was no one else to learn from at the time.
Well, I thank you so much for being on this episode, because I think coming out trans and that whole transitional phase and the whole thing is really complex and hard. But also adding the whole dynamic of either getting divorced or co-parenting, even if you're co-parenting in pretty good circumstances, it adds a whole nother level. So, and it's not uncommon. It is, especially now, which is, great that more kids and more people are feeling safe and able to come out. But it is not an easy road for them, and not an easy road for their parents.
Right.
So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it. And thank you, Son, for letting you share his story too. So
I'll pass that along.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you talked a little bit about some of the early signals. How did you approach the topic, and what were the steps, and sort of, this was now for you 10 years ago, it sounds like. So what were the resources? Who helped steer you? Let's talk about uncharted territory. It seems like you were really kind of writing the book yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I long say that I'm just so grateful for other parents that I met along the way. We were support systems for each other, because we were all navigating it, at the same time, those that I was able to meet. And there are resources out there for parents like PFLAG, which is the parents and families of lesbians and gays. But, it's all inclusive. And I met some of my dearest friends at those meetings, because, you show up and there isn't a lot of guidance. I think I was very fortunate did because I've always been an ally in this community. I don't know why, maybe because I struggled with my own authenticity for so long that when I had my own children, I realized that like trying to stifle who they were was the worst thing that I could do as a parent.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've always, been in the community, and I was fortunate to know who to call. I work in healthcare. I work at a children's hospital, and I knew what resources to take advantage of. I think that's why it was so important to me to start being a resource for other families and other women in particular, because it really is one of those unknown. You're like Googling, what you do. I think the best thing that I did right away was get him to a gender clinic, a children's hospital, but they're everywhere now, which at least in Massachusetts, we're again very lucky. But having true medical professionals, be part of our journey, was the best thing we could have done as a divorced family. And it was me who led, the charge on all of it. But having, real MDs, real accredited physicians be the one guiding us through the process made it less about me and my ex-husband navigating it together and allowed us to kind of be on the journey kind of in parallel with other people guiding us. And I have a strong personality, so I would have like bullied them into it, but it was nice to not have to, right? It was nice to have others that I could lean on and professionals that we could lean on to help us navigate some of that hard stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I'm really glad you brought up the medical piece, because I think that there's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding out there about what that means. Are you able to speak to that a little bit about, what that means, caring for a transgender child?
So, I mentioned earlier that Felix came out when he was 9, but in truth, we didn't seek help from a gender clinic till he was 11. And this is the piece where I'm like, really shouting from the rooftops that the best thing you can do is go as early as possible if you have a question around your child's gender, because we missed the boat. He was already going through female puberty, which added to his psychological distress. And, what really drove us to the gender clinic was that distress. His body was changing. Up until that point, he could fake it, right? He had short hair. He, was a little kid. And people would call him Buddy, and then when his body started changing was when, and then he was getting misgendered everywhere, which created enormous psychological consequences on him. And, if I had it to do all over again, I would say, listen to your kid. Like they're not, if your kid is, and this is what I learned day one at the gender clinic, insistent, persistent, consistent. And that was Felix. He was consistently, insistently, and persistently a boy. And he was telling me he was a boy in so many different ways. And I didn't think he was old enough to know. I say I ignored it for 2 years. I affirmed him at home, but it didn't stop that process, the normal biological process from happening, which is when so many kids experience distress. And as parents, like that's what we want to keep our kids from as much as possible. And we were in crisis, quite honestly, when we started at the gender clinic, and Felix was cutting, and he was suicidal at 11 years old. At 11 years old.
That is so hard. Yeah.
Right.
Sorry.
And that's where I think some, and to use the word conflict, it's too big of a word, although then it probably felt that way. But, navigating that with my ex-husband, I think there was, a lot of, well, this is just mental health issues. This is just anxiety. This is just depression. This has nothing to do with gender, and I remember the gender clinic saying to us distinctly as we sat there next to each other, that's for us to figure out. Like our job is to disqualify, not necessarily to qualify. We don't want to put a kid through a transition that shouldn't be going through a transition. So just because you're here doesn't mean your kid is following this path. It's our job to help you figure it out.
Right. Wow.
And so, and there is such a, we been part of health and human service studies. Felix has, donated his time to do a ton of different research studies to show kind of how, if you intervene at the right ages, you can have different outcomes for kids. And, the gender clinic, I said it before, but they saved his life. I mean, he would not be alive if not for the steps that he took in his gender transition. And with every step that he's taken, when he was at his worst, we pumped him full of head meds. He was on anti-anxiety, anti-anything that we could give him to keep him stable. He slept on the floor of my bedroom for 6 months. He had to graduate to a closet outside to make sure that he was safe, like outside of my room. And then he, at a certain age, you can put a puberty blocker into kids, and that just gives you the pause, right? They put puberty blockers in kids that are going through cancer or other kinds of treatment that, you don't want to harm the reproductive cycle. So it is a pause button, and it is completely reversible, and, was a time that allowed us to take a little bit of a breath and kind of assess where we were. And then from a medical perspective, there really is very strict guidelines around, what kids can do at what ages, under what kind of medical care, psychological care. He has seen psychiatrists, psychologists, psychopharmacologists, and they took us through every step of that. He would say himself, and I say that was life-saving. It was not the anti-anxiety. It was not, he's on 0 head meds right now at almost 19 years old. It was the puberty blocker, which led to him being put on testosterone at 13 and a half, which is, I think the age, it's 13 is actually the minimum, I think, for boys. It might be a little different for girls. He had to have a breast removal because he had grown female breasts at the time. And with every single step this kid took, everything that was happening disappeared as he was affirmed in his identity.
Like,
and
how amazing is that, though? Like, it's like gonna make me cry because that's like what a mom you are. Like, to support that and like.
I think like so many women though, like we all have our own story from when we were kids, right? And we grew, and whatever our generation is, I think any woman could identify with being told we're supposed to be more or less of something. And, mine was fairly extreme as a child, which, again, my kids' happiness and their well-being was like, it just, that's why I was put on this earth, and learn the lessons that I learned. So I don't know that I wanted to save my kid's life. Like, I didn't care what it was that was going to get him there. And thank God there are medical professionals out there, and there is research, and there is protocol for our kids to figure out who they are.
I have a question for you. As open and loving and like amazing medical care that you got for him, were there times like where it was hard for you too?
I mean, when he came out at 9, I think that's why I give myself so much, crap, is I kept telling him when he actually came out to me, this is a good story. It was July 10 years ago, and I was making dinner, having a glass of wine. He walks in, I remember it to this day. He was in like a Five Nights at Freddy's t-shirt and a pair of basketball shorts and short hair. And he looked at me and he said, I've been thinking about it. And when I go to middle school next year, I want to go as a boy. And he's been saying that, and anytime he did, I would kind of laugh or make a comment about like, you don't want to be a boy. Like, who wants to be a boy? Like, you're fine as you are, because I was afraid. I was pushing him into it because I am such an ally, and I have friends of all different shapes and sizes. And was he exposed to too much? Was it watching, did I give him too many options? Did I? And he looked at me, and it was like the most sobering thing that's ever happened. And he was 10 at the time. Actually, he was turning 11 in September, and he looked at me and he said, Mom, I keep telling you all the reasons why I'm a boy, and you keep telling me all the reasons why I'm.
Wow. He called you out.
Totally called me out. Totally called me out. And it was like he like gut punched me, and I looked at him and I like really took it in. And I was like, you're right. I don't know what this means. I don't know what this is going to look like from this point forward. Like, I
Well,
will,
it's
I
scary,
will.
right? It's
Yeah.
unsure, especially 10 years ago, it's uncharted
Right.
territory, right? Like you
Right.
don't know.
Well,
Like,
I
yeah.
was worried about how people would judge me, right?
right,
Like as a
right.
parent, as judge him, how would
Yes.
his life be harder? Again,
Hold on.
there were no kids. He was the first elementary school student in Framingham, which is a city, right, to
Right.
come out publicly in elementary
Mhm.
Yes.
school. And I wanted my kid to be okay, and I was petrified at first.
Yeah.
I was
Well,
petrified. I
yeah.
think
Your
why
first instinct is to protect, right? And
totally,
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
totally. And there are days, I think it's why I lean so hard into advocacy and encouraging him to be an advocate. He was part of
Uh-huh.
a Converse campaign when he was 12, and, he designed their first trans shoe, and he was in the
Oh, so
Pride,
cool.
Boston Pride Parade. And, he has done a lot. He's used his voice. He's, spoken at things.
Mhm.
And I really encourage that. And now at 19, he's at school, and he doesn't want to be out. He just wants to be Felix. And
Right.
sometimes I question, was that the right move? But everybody knew, right? Again, because we were one of the first that,
Right.
he couldn't help but carry this moniker of being
Yeah.
the trans kid. And so I just wanted him to be as proud of himself as possible. But
Yeah.
it was, yeah, so I think I leaned extra hard into
Mhm.
we got this, we
Right.
are going to shout it from the rooftops
Mhm.
because there's nothing to be ashamed of. And
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, but it was very hard. It was not a lot of parents experience this grief over losing a child. Well,
Mhm.
that
Yeah.
I had all these thoughts about who my child would be, or I have all these
Right.
memories. I remember my child being miserable from a very early age, and
Mhm.
I didn't understand why. And
Right.
so I have never missed that child,
That's interesting.
because he's
So
happier.
for me, so I have a trans stepson,
Yeah.
and I I wouldn't say it was mourning because I don't feel like I was long enough in his life before to like mourn it. But I feel like I'm a very open person, like I said, and I have always been an advocate or been someone who I would think is very like caring and would like be there ready to support anyone going through any change or transition. I had a harder time with which is interesting to me, and I'm interested to see what you say. I had a harder time with the name change than I did with the gender change.
Interesting.
Which, and the only reason I'm sharing that is because now it's like I don't even think of their dead name now. Like it doesn't even come into my head. Um, and I felt really terrible about it being hard for me
Mm.
because I'm like, I'm not this type of person. I'm not a person that's like against this or hateful and I did have some struggle with it. Um, and you didn't have that at all?
You know, no.
Yeah.
And
Good. That's a good
it does
thing.
make me a bit of an anomaly. I mean, I have so
Right.
many friends at this point who have
Right.
trans or non-binary or genderqueer kiddos, and so many have gone through that mourning process over
Yeah.
any number of things or trouble. I
Yeah.
had a hard time getting used to the name.
Yeah.
A hard
Well,
time getting
so that
used
was
to
so
the pronoun.
here's my process, and it's like it makes me feel like a bad person and not who I want to be or who I really am. But like at first, when he changed his name, I would only say his name now, like when I was with him, and then I would say his old name when I was like talking about him or something. And then like a month into doing that, I'm like, first of all, that is not who I want to be. That is not who I
Yeah.
am. That's not accepting him. That's pretending to accept him, and that's not okay with me. And also that is way, way harder than accepting it and using the right
Using it all
pronouns
the
and using
time.
the right
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
But it took me time, and it's something I feel bad about.
I think we all need to forgive ourselves. I like to remind myself that number one, life is long. Like you're
Yeah.
talking about a month out of somebody's life where you
Right.
got a little tripped up on
Right.
something. But you're affirming now, and I look back and I have guilt that my kid had to have a boob job because I didn't get him to
Right.
a gender clinic fast enough,
Right.
right? Like he had to
Right.
have actual surgery because of my
Right.
mistake. And it took me a while to forgive myself of that. But like
Yeah.
I think it's a process. It's a
Right.
process
Sure.
for, my daughter misgendered him and for those who have younger kiddos, like
Mhm.
it's a process,
Right.
Skylar's first, when we told her, which was the same night that he came out to me, and she was like, "Oh, I knew that."
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Didn't mean she
Yeah.
got the name right. Didn't mean she
Right.
got the
Right.
pronouns right, but navigating that and affirming and and for Felix, he was half in, half out for a little while too, till we figured things out. And so on the soccer field, when he's on a girls' team at the time, what do I scream?
Right.
Do I talk to the coach? Don't I talk to the coach? What
Yeah.
about what if my ex-husband's there? He's
Right.
still not affirming in the right name or the right gender. Like, how do I negotiate this? So yeah, I don't know. I don't think that there's one perfect way. I think we
Right.
kind of mess up a little
I
bit.
know. It's so,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think what I would want another parent who's hearing this episode is like, obviously how amazing, your story and Felix's story is, but also that like, it's okay if it's uncomfortable, you will mess up. And hopefully
Yes.
like that, in the forefront of your mind is your kids' safety,
Totally.
love, mental health. I mean, that's what we all like can put across the board. If you're listening to our podcast, that's what you care about, right? So
Yeah.
hopefully they can get that from this.
Yeah. I mean, I do remember saying to him at one point, because he was getting particularly frustrated with my daughter, who, she was 2 years younger. So Felix
Right.
was, 11, she was 8 or 9 when it was starting. And,
Yeah.
or at least we were actively talking about things.
Yeah.
And, I just remember telling him, like, I love you. I see who you are. I'm going to screw it up. She's
Right.
going to
Yeah.
screw it up. People are going to screw it
Right.
up. Like, and you have to decide how you take that in. Like,
Yeah.
the complex conversations that you have to have with your kid when you're
Right.
going through this. And,
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say, I don't know about Felix, but I would say in my situation with my stepson, he's been very patient. And we've had a lot of open conversations where I say like, I'm doing like, especially at the beginning where I would like misgender by accident or say she or like you never realize how much you use gender affirming stuff like, hey girl, like I say that all, I never knew I said that until right. And then I'm like, no, like, but he's been very patient and kind about it. And we've had very open conversations about it, which I think is awesome.
Yeah,
And
totally.
hats off to him for that.
Totally.
Part of what I want to talk about too is helping people who may not have considered this as a situation they find themselves in is, for people who might think it's an attention seeking thing. I mean, you talked very clearly about how Felix, at an early age and was very clear, right? My question to you is, how do you see it? I have an opinion on this, but how do you see the increase in incidents, or I guess we could say living your gender out in the world? How would you explain that to someone who says, well, now everybody's just trans?
Right.
Yeah,
non-binary.
it's such a tough question, right? There are times where I even question, and I've watched lots of kids question who they are and then swing back in the other direction again.
Right.
I think, a couple things. I think we have to uncouple medical intervention and permanent changes from affirming your child in the state that they're in. Right. And so, kids who are questioning or saying any number of things, I've always heard just affirm them, you would affirm them in other things as long as it wasn't harming them. And so, giving them the space to feel safe in how they are, representing themselves and who they believe they are, that might change. I've changed a ton in my almost 50 years of life. Maybe not my gender, but certainly how I express myself or what I'm willing to show people. And, I don't quite understand the large influx of kids that are coming out and identifying this way. I mean, I think it's a combination of science. I joke with Felix that it was the BPA in the water bottles or the baby bottles.
Oh my God, I just figured it out. We figured out
I totally screwed up your brain chemistry, kid. Like, we just joke about it, and I love that fact that we can bring humor into it because some of it is humorous, is it society? Is it just that it's easier for kids to express themselves? I don't know. I think, for the kids that I know that have, not taken any permanent steps, but certainly identified as they or she when they were he or he when they were a she and swung back again, as long as they're happy, what does it really matter? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
I guess that's what I come to. If identifying in a certain way is going to create some peace in a child,
Right.
and you're not, what certain people want us to believe, mutilating their bodies or giving them drugs that they shouldn't have. Like, again,
Right.
steeped medical process,
Right.
real professionals who are
Yeah.
helping you guide a child through that process.
Mhm.
What's the harm? So
Right.
what?
Yeah.
So what?
Right.
Um,
Agreed.
I mean,
Agreed.
that's my mentality anyway. And, I think, the research, it's funny, Felix was just asked to be part of another research study, and that's being done locally here at GEMS, where they're following some of their patients that started very early on, because there's this lore out there around kids detransitioning, that it's just a phase, or but it's not true.
Mhm.
The statistics do not prove that out. And
Right.
more and more gender clinics, because now we're in a decade of kids really starting
Yeah.
to come
Mhm.
out in these ways, the vast majority, are still on their path, and they're doing okay as long as they're affirmed,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I guess I just say, what's the harm? So if your child
Yeah.
wants to be called by a different name and that can
Right.
affirm them and make them feel a little bit more comfortable,
Yeah.
I think for so many of these kids, what's the alternative, right? I mean,
Right.
Felix talks all the time, given, and I won't talk politics, but given the current political climate
Yeah.
and, a lot of the laws that have been enacted,
Right.
Yes.
he is very clear that he will not be here if he cannot continue taking testosterone, if he
Right.
cannot continue presenting as the person that he is,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So I think for so many kids, it really is an issue of life or death.
Yes.
It truly is. And
Right.
Yeah.
so those kids are so brave. I think, again, that's why, like, as a mom, I want to be out there to just say,
Right.
like, you just keep doing
Doing
this.
it.
And
Yes.
I'm grateful my kid is a positive story. They're not
Yeah.
all positive, but,
Right.
we do have such a clear story, and he has such a powerful story to share because, it was so clearly tied to his gender. And, like, I have a kid that anybody would kill for. Like,
Right.
he's phenomenal.
Or am I?
Yeah.
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 Yeah, he's thriving. He's absolutely thriving. I asked him today, I said, okay, you've been at college for 1 week, on a scale of 1 to 10, how you doing? He said, it's an 8.5. And I thought, God,
That's
from
good.
where we were 10 years ago to
Right.
where he is now,
Seriously.
like
Yeah.
8.5, and
Right.
he's, out there living his best life. Like, what parent wouldn't want that for their kid?
Absolutely. An 8.5 the first week of college. Yeah, I'll take it. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
totally. I'll take it.
I'm going to try to shift a little bit to co-parenting. I guess we don't have to really talk about your family specifically, but what would you say to maybe a parent that's more of on the advocate side, more like, strongly aligned with their kid? And then if they have a parent that's not accepting, what would
Mhm.
you say to that mom or dad, I guess?
I mean, a couple things, I guess. One is that there are resources out there so that you don't necessarily have to be the person that's doing the
Right.
work with your co-parent. That, there are plenty of ways to support that other parent. And, in my time, what I've seen is it tends to be men who are more conservative, and
Yeah.
women who tend to be, and the moms that tend to be, behind their kids.
Right.
But I've seen,
Say
queer
both.
families and any constellation of families where there's somebody that isn't quite on board. And I think, again, thank goodness we live where we live. And for those that are not part of this country, thank goodness for social media.
Yeah.
I thank goodness there are resources out there where you can learn from others who have walked this path. And,
Mhm.
I think finding a safe parent to talk to, offering, I love the dads out there that I know, and the moms that started in places where they may not have been accepting and
Right.
have walked the path, that are willing to just talk to other parents. I think that's where something like a P flag comes in handy. And
Yeah.
offering those kinds of resources to, that I think coming to some level of agreement that you both want what's best for your child. I mean,
Right.
and if you can get there, then it's like, okay, well, then I can't be the one to teach him. We're divorced for a reason. He
Right.
does not want to
Yeah.
hear it from me. He will not
We did
absorb
not
it
do
from me. He's
conflict well
Right.
to begin with. Yes.
Yeah.
totally, totally. And that would, it would just be disastrous. So I think, it really is, it is coming to some acknowledgement that maybe things aren't what you thought that they were,
Mhm.
that everybody's going to have feelings about it. Even the strongest of allies and advocates
Yeah.
is going to have feelings about it, and that you need support. You can't go through it alone, but you also can't ignore it, because statistics, they're too dire. The
They
statistics out
really
there
are.
about kids who, are not allowed to transition or wait too long. I just spoke to a friend whose child, just dropped out of college because, they are 18 years old and were not allowed to transition any earlier, and they're questioning their life at 18 when they should be going off to school, like my
Right.
son, right?
Right.
So it's I think coming back to the heart place and the place where we want our kids to be okay, and then finding the resources to
Yeah.
help you navigate those conversations.
Yeah. And
I
finding
really
the
like
research, I mean,
that.
I could imagine with your, like, so I'm thinking of the example where one parent is an ally and one parent isn't, right? Maybe being able to find the resources for your kid to be able to manage that, because that's a
Yeah.
whole challenge. And sometimes, I think the idea that two parents can be on the same page with the love and care of their kid is ideal, but not always the case, right?
Um,
So being able to find the resources and help your kid as much as you can
right.
is really the best you can do.
100%. There are still things, and it's not my story to share necessarily, but there are still things I think where, I am such a flag waving ally that, whatever
Same.
my child needs of me, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do it. Like there's no
Right.
question, right? And there's still pause for
Mhm.
my ex and
Mhm.
around certain things, and
Mhm.
he has his own process and his own reasons for those pause, but
Mhm.
that's not mine anymore. Like that
Right.
is a conversation that hopefully my son is now well equipped to be
Right.
able to stand up for his beliefs and for who
Right.
he is, and for him to navigate those conversations in appropriate ways at appropriate ages.
Right.
But
I
it's
do
often
love the approach of bringing even if it's not like getting on hormone
totally.
replacements or anything, but having medical professionals there, like it sort of involves someone that's not you giving advice and information.
That's like science and data driven, right?
Mhm.
It's been studied and proven.
Right.
And I mean, Hillary, you're a family is like a living, breathing evidence of that. I'm also mindful sort of thinking about those parents who don't come along necessarily, or how you have to kind of tug them along, right? I mean, they really need to think about, if they're not on board, what kind of relationship do you want with your child, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're not gonna be a full-throated supporter of your kid, they're gonna know. And what is that
Mhm.
gonna mean for that relationship down the line, right?
Yeah.
So I say that to, I'm sort of playing an advocate on this conversation as well, because I'm thinking about those parents who may be reluctantly coming to the table. Like,
Right.
what is it that you want for your kid? Do you want them to be alive? Do you want them to be depressed? Do you want them to be or do you want them to thrive? Do you want them
Right.
to
Do you want them to be
be
an
themselves?
8.5 on the first week of college? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
think
I think it's a good point. I think, it's not our job to convince the other parent. Like it's just not. And I
right.
guess my reminder for a lot of parents out there, I'm staring down 50 in 4 months, and I'm almost an empty nester. And I remember when I was going through the thick of the conflict, the thick of the
Mhm.
divorce, and this was on the heels of our divorce, right? Like
Yeah.
we were still
God,
not even like fully
that's a
divorced
lot.
yet. And so, life is long, and people
Mhm.
do change, and
Mhm.
I've changed, my ex-husband's changed. I think it's our job to remind our children that our co-parent, father, other mother, whatever it might
Mhm.
be, that they love their child, and that they may be having problems with this, but it doesn't mean they don't love them. And I remember
Right.
having
Yeah.
a conversation constantly with Felix, was this is that your dad cares about you so much. He's just having a hard time figuring this out. But I believe in your dad. I believe in his heart. He will
Mhm.
find his way.
Right.
What
And here we
really
are now,
what
right?
Right.
Where
goodness.
there's
Yeah.
full acceptance and
Yeah.
full, so it's just in the moment, I think things feel very hard, and it's very easy to feel stuck and feel like things
Mhm.
aren't gonna ever change. But
Yeah.
life has a way of doing that, right? And
Right.
it is staying the course and doing the best that you can by your kid.
Yeah. And that's really all you can do. I mean, like you said, you can't control the other parent.
Right.
And you hope that they can come along in whatever pace they are coming in, but it doesn't always happen.
It doesn't. I think, one other thing I didn't mention that I think is essential is therapy for our kids. The
I think
best
for
thing
every kid.
I,
This has been phenomenal.
I know, you're amazing.
oh, please. I'm just a mom who loves her kids.
But that's all we are too.
Right.
Right? And that's what matters. And,
Yeah.
We always say, like, from our support group and stuff, is like, we just want to bottle this because this is the stuff that matters, like empowering other moms. Like, this shit is scary. Like, if your kid comes out to you and you're terrified, like you're saying, I don't know how the world's going to react to you. I don't want you to feel pain, right? We all want all of our kids in a bubble, or at least I want my kid like wrapped, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, putting them out there in the world and giving them the support and love that they need, like, that's my stuff.
Yeah, there's so much promise, though. I mean, with my kid going off to college, and granted, he's at UVM, groovy UV, and it attracts a certain kind of kid. And, but I asked him today, we were FaceTiming, and I said, well, tell me about your friends that you've made so far. I'm like, are they straight? Are they trans? He's like, everybody's all over the map. Right. And some people are out and some people aren't out. We're just like getting to know each other as people. And like, I was most worried about other kids. The thing I had to actually worry about was the adults, not the kids. Everybody knew who my kid was. Nobody was surprised when he came out. He had been presenting that way for years. Right. And so, I have a lot of faith that this next generation, it is, if we can support them as they're developing, like, only good things can come from that down the line.
Agreed. Definitely. Love it. Well,
this was fun. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was so great. And we've been wanting to do this episode. Like, it's such an important topic to us. We want people to know that we are your allies. We care about you. And we're here.
It's awesome. Yeah. And if anybody needs to talk to a parent, I am always willing to talk to anybody who wants to have a private conversation, because, just talking about it is a first step.
Yeah. Awesome.
You're the
Thank
best.
you so much.
Thank you, Hilary.
Absolutely. Thank you both.
Our stories are the thread that ties us together. While our stories are different, we can often find common ground through our struggles. If co-parenting has been difficult due to an ex's alcohol abuse, you need SoberLink. How it works is simple. Your co-parent will test at scheduled times. Built-in facial recognition confirms their identity. Tamper sensors flag any attempts to cheat, and results get sent instantly to your phone so you know that your kids are with a sober parent. Lay the groundwork for brighter days ahead. Visit www.soberlink.com/coffee to learn more and get $50 off your device.
Oh my God. I hope everyone loved that interview as much as I did.
I know. I mean, the thing I wanted to say about this episode, and I don't think I really said it in it, but we understand that people may not feel the same way as we do about supporting your kids through a transition. And we know it's like a huge topic, and everyone has different feelings, and we can respect that. As a mom and as a person, I'm going to support and love my kid no matter where they are in their journey, or if they are transitioning. And if you don't feel that way, that's really not our problem. And we're not there for, like, we're not here for that. So
yeah, I think we're really here to help parents whose kids are experiencing, these how do I want to say this, who are either exploring gender or, a lot of young kids, I think, are too young to talk about sort of the lesbian, gay sort of end of things. But I mean, that part comes up, and I feel like that's a little bit more ubiquitous in terms of our culture. And, I realize that not everyone will be in favor of approving, I guess I'm trying to say, of children who may be lesbian or gay, or or just probably in that case trans as well.
Yeah.
But like I said in the interview, I think about what kind of relationship you want with your kid,
right?
And if you can accept them for who they are and who they say they are, I think maybe in the long run, in my opinion, in the long run, it's gonna set them up to be a successful adult, whatever that looks like. So,
Agreed.
but yeah, we're certainly not here to argue what people agree with or don't agree with in terms of that subject, because this is not a political thing for us. So,
Right.
um, anyway, should we pivot over to before? Thank you, Hillary, so
Yes.
much
Thank you,
again.
Hilary. It's so awesome.
Should we pivot over to our story?
Yes, we have a new story and it's so good. It's called Layer Cake. They titled it, which I love. It says, my ongoing divorce has been a layer cake of discovery. The first layer was realizing my ex is an alcoholic. Shortly after my ex's suicide attempt, hospitalization, and my filing of a restraining order, a friend with a mental health background suggested I go to Al-Anon. I started going out of desperation. As I listened to others share their experiences and I read the literature, I learned about my own life. I started to understand how what I've been experiencing the past 20 years wasn't my fault. I didn't cause it. I couldn't control it, and I couldn't cure it. I was powerless. The second layer was realizing I'd suffered from narcissistic abuse. After listening to me talk, my therapist suggested I read a book about narcissistic abuse and learn about narcissistic personality disorder. Books became podcasts, and the more I learned about narcissistic abuse, the more I felt as if I was reading about my own life. The literature would mention word for word things my ex said, exact things he had done. I check off nearly every check on the checklists, even though the details of the other situations were different. The behaviors were the same. The third layer has been the most painful, realizing I'd been in a domestic violence relationship for the past 20 years. This happened, oh, that gave me chills, sorry. This happened when I was telling a trusted coworker about challenges I was having. She validated my experience, named it as domestic violence, and gave me a number for a domestic violence organization. It had never occurred to me that that's what my situation was. When I was in it, I was continually adapting to survive and slowly losing more and more of myself, my confidence, my identity, my existence. I'd been broken down and had become a ghost of a person. Having the space to be away from it allowed me to finally see it for what it was. With each layer of the cake, though, there have been sweetness, an icing, so to speak. The first layer brought me to Al-Anon. Pain recognizes pain, and that understanding is a kind of relief that can't be explained. Al-Anon has connected me with love and support and kindness I did not know existed. Al-Anon has given me tools to lead the life with serenity. It has shown me a way forward. Al-Anon has been life-giving. The second layer of learning about narcissistic abuse has brought an empowerment through education and awareness, an ability to understand how my empathy is a superpower, but also kryptonite when in the hands of the wrong person. The third layer brought me to a domestic violence advocate. One of the most insightful things my advocate said to me is, you cannot co-parent with an abuser. It just doesn't work. They will never accommodate you. You can only parallel parent. Approaching parenting with an abuser is a wholly different from parenting with someone who is toxic. Everything has to be different. I would not have discovered any of these layers had I not gotten to the breaking point in my life that brought about my divorce. Each layer has been more painful than the previous, but discovering the icing surrounding it is how I got through it.
Wow.
How I mean, that, first of all, like, talk about bravery, right? Like, oh
Woo.
my God, so much.
And how beautiful to be able to make meaning out of it and to find the sweetness. I am not one for toxic positivity.
Yeah,
I think it's okay
absolutely.
to say like when something sucks, like this sucks.
Yeah.
And I, do I think that you have to kind of like keep fighting to get to the positive? Yes. But like to go through this, like it's a layer cake, but like, you know, bless this person, because it takes a lot to get out of a, I mean, that's really like a triple dose of toxic, between the abuse and the alcoholism, you know, and the, oh my God, and the narcissism. I mean, those things often kind of go hand in hand, but still, I mean, hats off to this person, because they're really going through it, but also finding themselves along the way, which is beautiful.
Which I think, as we always say, that's the piece I love. I mean, that's the piece that keeps me working with women that are going through divorces, because you do get to see the icing. And you do get to find yourself, and it sucks. Sometimes it really sucks, and it's awful and so painful. I mean, she just said it so perfectly.
Yeah.
Far, far better than I'd ever say it. So thank you so much for listening to episode 1, season 2.
Yeah, we can't wait to keep it going, and we love your feedback. Please give us a review.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for Co-Parenting and Coffee. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice on any subject matter. If you liked our podcast, feel free to drop us a review. We'd appreciate it. Looking forward to seeing you next time for a cup of coffee and a chat with another expert on co-parenting.